Greetings and salutations, listener. It is May 19th, 2014, and this is the Two Nerds Podcast. I am Eric J. Chucci, as always, here with my broadcast partner, the boy.
Hey.
And today we're going to be talking about player characters. But before we do, I'd just like to get this out of the way. Please, please, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really want to, share the video, because it actually does help us out. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to our pal Super Blizzard, who so graciously let us use his Shining Lozado song, Let's Get Hardcore, as the show's theme. You can head to his Bandcamp page, linked in the description, and buy up all his awesome wrestling songs. So, this is kind of an abstract concept for a podcast. So far, we went super focused with the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, and we did sort of a Elder Scrolls retrospective, a little bit of WoW and WildStar sprinkled in there as well. But we were talking some more, and we thought, there's still some untouched, untapped market in the Elder Scrolls, and most of it revolved around the characters we play. And on a broader sense, I think player characters are interesting. You're basically given structured but unlimited choices, and the decisions you make and the way you play those characters not only says a lot about yourself, but says a lot about the way you can interact with the game world. And I thought as a broader concept that might be something a little easier to talk about than just fluffing our own character concepts from Skyrim.
Yeah, I was gonna help with the introduction, but that's pretty much it.
Well, since I've stolen that right from you, why don't you go ahead and lead us off? What do you think is an interesting way you've ended up playing a character, either in a game, a video game, or in a role-playing setting?
Well, honestly, my first character from Skyrim is probably a good example. It was a mage, obviously. I mentioned before I play mages. And he was, very, very good guy. Upright, did all the right things, did all the good people quests in Skyrim, avoided the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood and all that sort of thing. Didn't steal from people, even when it's really, absurdly easy to steal from people, almost as if they're daring you to. But
well, it's that big red text. It's like, some people see it as a warning. I see it as an invitation for danger.
Yeah. Or maybe something a little less
asinine?
Yeah. So, the funny thing was, as the game went on, he got involved with the Dragonborn expansion. It's been a long time, so obviously I don't care if I spoil it for people, because if you haven't played it by now, you're probably not gonna.
Yeah, if you're listening to our podcast, expect spoilers abound, unless it's something that we haven't played, and then, we can't spoil it for you, now can we?
As much as we might like to. Well, the process and the steps in that expansion went through, and he went completely insane. He is now a terrible, murdering, hoarding psychopath who runs around the map murdering anyone with gear he hasn't seen before in an attempt to take it.
I think that's an interesting launching off point. Where characters can go that you weren't expecting. Obviously, not everybody who plays a character lets that character organically grow. In fact, I know a lot of people from back in my days of writing fan fiction, more so than role-playing, who like to keep their OCs, really strongly in line. They have a set path, they want them to do a certain thing, so even when it means acting out of character or making an odd decision, they'll be like, no, we need this for the story. And, I know a lot of writers who do that as well. Just straight up original content writers who refuse to bend to what their character would do for the preservation of the story, which I think is interesting in two other ways, because that does really cross over into role-playing in video games, into being railroaded by a DM who wants to get specific plot elements taken care of, and forces you to make certain decisions in the most ungraceful kind of way, or by a video game who, makes your character hold the idiot ball for a little while they try to...
Because there's only so many things they can program, and
right.
At a certain point, you might play a character who doesn't want to do this quest, but if you'd like to keep playing the game, you're going to have to. You have the option, obviously, of turning it off, but if you wish to see the end of the story, congratulations, you get to act contrary to what the character you're playing might want to do, simply because it is, in fact, the only way forward.
Yeah, I believe we were talking about that for you in the first Mass Effect. I know I felt it really strongly in the second Dragon Age game.
Yep.
Where there's a very obvious crime being perpetrated by a very obvious individual. I just wanted to hunt them down and kill them, but no, the game says you haven't figured that out yet. Bad things have to happen first.
And honestly, in the first Mass Effect, it was pretty much the exact same thing. I had only been playing Commander Shepard for a few minutes, but I knew what I wanted to do, and the game didn't let me. So,
which early enough in that game was pursue Saren, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, he got away in his gigantic, ridiculous warship.
Yeah, and it's one thing when a game gives you good reasons why your character would make these decisions or believe these things. For all the faults Final Fantasy VIII has, everybody being kind of stupid and illogical at times, irrational, because the Guardian forces are draining their memories, that's an okay plot point. I think it creates interesting reasoning behind a lot of stupid actions.
But, yeah, I don't have as much problem with that end of that story, simply because that's their character. They have very strong... Final Fantasy in general has very strong, established characters.
True.
Anything they do is within character because someone else wrote that character. Someone else decided what that character was going to do. I can't really know if it was out of character for them or not. The more interesting subject, the more interesting part of that is when you're playing a game that sort of backs off of that throttle,
Yeah.
lets you play a character you make the decisions for, a character you have sort of free reign over, like the Elder Scrolls or Dragon Age or Skyrim or Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, same sense. I was gonna say Knights of the Republic.
Right.
They give you freedom, as much freedom as they possibly can, given the constraints they're under. But every now and again, you come across a decision where your character logically would just leave, or wouldn't get involved in this business. I know, having not played the original BioShock all the way through, there is a point in that game where, had I played it, I would have set it down, turned off the controller, and not played it anymore.
Which I think is kind of funny, that these problems exist in the first place. I've run a little experiment a couple of times now, and so far so good, where because people I do pen and paper role-playing with, for whatever reason, refuse to experience some of the fun of classic role-playing games on consoles.
He's staring a hole in my chest right now, y'all don't even know.
I'm staring at the container of Parmesan topping on my desk. You don't lie to Ultimo Dragon. That's mean. He knows.
He can see us.
Yes, he's frowning.
He can see everything.
And you should feel awful. But no, yeah, Boy is one of the people who I have tried to share these stories with. But for whatever reason, they don't want to play the old games, and that's fine. But I think these are great stories, so I set up a world and a storyline that mostly closely follows the plots of these stories. And, the games I've used so far have been Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IX. I had a brief foray into 7. I think we had like 2 sessions worth. We've done some Chrono Trigger. That was a little more freeform. And right now I'm running Mass Effect, which has been... I'm looking to do that a bit differently anyway. But for the most part, without me really railroading anything or guiding the players, they've made the same decisions the characters in the games made. And I think that's something that game designers either don't try hard enough to do or don't have the time to try hard enough to do, which is make the player want to make the decisions that need to be made for the sake of the story. You're always going to have a contrarian, who wants to do the exact opposite. Give them the option to do the opposite, show them why that doesn't work, and still allow them to reroute back into your story. this is something that if you read the Dungeons and Dragons DM's guides, they'll give you insight into how to do that, because you have to think on your feet when you're a DM.
Yes, I know.
The players will always.
That actually bridges into an interesting side conversation. One of the campaigns I'm running right now is with my broadcast partner here and his wife, and they both, as player characters, have a absolutely reliable habit. Whatever plans I have made, they will upset, destroy, and render impossible to complete as a DM, unless I railroad them. So, what I've always done is simply just, instead of showing them why it doesn't work and moving them back onto the story I've, come up with, I simply move the goalposts. I move the story I've come up with to where they are heading. It's much simpler.
Well, and you don't really have that luxury with a console game, but just the same as you don't really have a luxury to ignore the path from point A to point C and charge straight through, which is often what I find Brandy and I do. Or ignore the situation entirely, which I don't know if you've ever heard of side quests, but it's a great way to pretend like you don't have to go fight the final boss for a while. But bridging back a little more, pulling ourselves back into what we were originally talking about, which is characters. Running a game, writing a story, carrying a story, that is a deep topic that I'm sure we could cover another time. But characters themselves, a lot of what inspired this was our Skyrim characters, and as you mentioned, Yoter, your Nord mage, growing and becoming a very different person from when you originally started playing. And I remember I watched you play some of that character. Skyrim was so fresh and so interesting that unlike most voiced games, I actually watched and listened and, saw what your character was doing when it wasn't stuff I hadn't already done yet. And he was Captain America, or Captain Skyrim. He was a good guy.
Do you think this S on my head stands for Hammerfell?
It's really... I wonder how many people really think about the impact that certain situations have on their character. My Dragon Age 2 character went very similarly. He was a pretty fun guy. I started out making dialogue choices either between the snarky option or the nice option. I was helpful. I made jokes with my friends. And then after a certain point, Dragon Age is an interesting game. Dragon Age 2 is an interesting game in this respect, because depending on the choices you make, the game sort of shifts. Now, because of the class I'd selected and the characters I hung around with and some of the decisions I've made, my game had been custom tailored to make it look like all mages were crazy pants.
And to be fair, there is something in the water in that city, and a lot of the mages in that city are crazy pants, but not all of them. He just happened to have run into the worst possible parts of that situation.
Well, and also, at your suggestion, I recently got about halfway through playing a mage and trying to be a bit more open-minded toward a couple of characters. And dialogue choices you make and some of the situations you can get into, the dialogue changes because you're a mage. And when you're playing a mage, it makes mages in general sound less crazy. Skyrim kind of does the same thing. If you play, right in the beginning, if you side with the Imperials, if you go in the dungeon with the Imperial guys, it makes the Stormcloaks sound like zealots, like madmen, like the Tea Party for
Talos worship.
Yeah, for Talos worship. Right when you walk through that first gate, your companion says, "Oh, good, there's Stormcloaks on the other side of this gate. Maybe we can talk to them and see if they will," and they attack you like crazy murderers. But if you go the Stormcloak side, and you're hiding on the other side of that gate, it makes the Imperium sound like oppressors.
total black shirt fascists.
Yeah. And you guys are constantly hiding, ducking around. The Imperials are like, we're going to do this, and this is the way it's going to be, and if you don't like it, then you may die beneath our boot heel.
And to be fair, the start of the game, before you go into either tunnel, kind of makes it seem like the Imperials are horrible oppressors anyway. Oh, hey guy we don't know, who's not on any of our prisoner lists and probably is innocent. No, we're gonna go chop off your head anyway.
I really think it's just that one lady, because the guy reading the list is like, he's not on the list, should we? Yes, do it, now! Alright, I'm sorry, dude.
She's my boss.
I wish I could, I'll make sure your remains are sent back wherever the hell it is you're from. And you walk up, and they've got Jarl Ulfric, who murdered the High King, shouted him apart. Standing right there. Who did they kill first? Some no-name. And then you. And it's that same guard captain who's like, now that guy, kill him now.
Maybe she's a Stormcloak spy.
Maybe
she's trying to delay Jarl Ulfric.
I'm sure Jarl Ulfric got a plan here. He's going to take off that shitty gag.
Which should in no way be limited. I've seen that guy's Thoom. He blew me across a room once. That should in no way be inhibiting him.
He's just standing there thinking, I could destroy all of them in like 5 seconds if I breathe through the gag, and they're idiots. I'm going to get out of this some way or another. A dragon, I didn't expect that, but I'll take it. Thanks, Talos. But, so Dragon Age 2 does that as well, I have found out. And when you play as a mage, as you did the first time through Dragon Age, mages in general look less crazy.
The only time through Dragon Age. In Dragon Age, once you've played a mage, you can't play anything else. Nothing's fun anymore. You played the best class.
Whereas, I played a rogue the first time through, so his libido mind was broken. Like, I accidentally got finagled into a relationship with Anders, and by the 3rd chapter of that game, he just hated all mages. I drew a sketch of him riding a golem like a surfboard. I'm sorry, he was on the shoulders of a golem who was riding a surfboard made of mage corpses to go to the gallows so that he could bring sweet, sweet justice to the mages.
So, mages, not his favorite people on Earth.
Which, outside of the character, obviously, I don't, I have my opinions on the matter, but again, another discussion for another day. But the character went through that, and he started as this friendly guy, this kind of happy-go-lucky guy, enough shit dumps on him, and he just loses his mind.
Mm-hmm. I had kind of the opposite experience with a Skyrim character. I've played a lot of Skyrim characters. I'm still playing that game in 2014. Is a high elf barbarian I made. Like I mentioned in the previous podcast, I tend to play characters who aren't what they're supposed to be. The high elf barbarian started off as like this really skeevy guy. He was probably some sort of like. I started the campaign joking, no, this guy totally deserved to have his head cut off. Whatever he did to end up with in this, no, he did it. Whatever it was. He was not innocent. He was not wrongfully imprisoned. But he went through the companion's quest line and talked to Codlike Whitemane about the nature of being a warrior with honor. And he ended up going through and, helping these people and getting this, this other guy's castle back for him that had been taken over by bandits. And just the entire game sort of snowballed into him becoming a really good guy. He had kind of a redemption story happen to him without me even really trying for it. It was just the decisions that happened and what he did sort of led him on this path to being what is now the pillar of the community. He gives to charity, he plays tag with little kids, he's a very nice guy now, and that was not what I had intended to do with that character going into the game.
I had a somewhat similar experience. My Argonian assassin, Blood in the Water, he was brutal. Just like a murderer. He killed people for no reason. He was an awful, I would say, human being, but he's a lizard man.
Not a terribly good lizard man either.
No, he was a dick. Dick among lizard men. It's a real cloaca. But, in joining the Assassin's Guild of all things, it gave him a sense of family. And while he's still a murderous fuck, he's got this sort of... it's a bit like Deathstroke, I think. He's got this strong sense of family and camaraderie, and he holds those who are close to him, those few, incredibly close. To the point that he joined the Stormcloaks after the Assassin's Guild storyline. Not because he believed in their cause, and certainly not because he was a native son of Skyrim, but just to drive the point home and really get his revenge. It's super funny. And I think, ironically, I know we're peeling away from characters again, I think that's a lot of the fun and the point and the experience behind the Pokemon Nuzlocke Challenge.
Oh, this is a digression I wasn't planning on.
No, I wasn't thinking about it until just now, actually. I've got some YouTube videos I was watching. Munching Orange's Nuzlocke Challenge. He's a pretty good guy if you want to check out his channel. But you are creating essentially a bunch of little characters. Part of the rules of the Nuzlocke Challenge, for those of you who aren't in the know, anytime a Pokemon faints, you have to release it. It's dead. Unlike usual where you just take it to the Poke Center, get it healed up, and go about your business. And you can only catch the first Pokemon on every zone. Even if it's shitty, even if it's one you already have, those are the default rules. Third rule is kind of unofficial, but everybody follows it. There's a bunch of unofficial rules and modifications you can make, but the third rule is you have to name your Pokemon, because it creates a bond. And 9 times out of 10, people will give their Pokemon a name that's actually a name, not just like, Buttfart.
Buttlole.
Gary Oak is, he's still allowed to be called Buttfart. But,
to be fair, his name is Wangbro.
Yeah, Wangbro in yours. I can't remember what I called him in my first game. I've named him something cromulent since then. But, you are essentially creating 6 or more individual characters, with their own strengths and weaknesses. And when that little HP bar gets low, you gasp. And if you lose somebody, it changes you as you're playing through this game. It's all this suspension of disbelief, but instead of the effect being made on a fictional character, it's your bond with the fictional character that's being tested. And I think that's a pretty interesting experiment, socially and psychologically speaking. Now, obviously it's a more challenging version of the game, but, so's a no potion run. It doesn't pull at your heartstrings,
Personally, I just find Nuzlocke challenges, I don't want to play them having just started Pokemon, because I just think the whole concept is way too depressing.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to at first either, but, getting into that's, again, a bit of another topic for another day. We have lots of plans for lots of things to talk about on this podcast.
That's the thing. We're actually waiting for stuff to do a lot of other podcasts that kind of have to happen in certain time periods. But we'll get to those.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys out there who want to hear about our opinions of the Marvel movie universe, who want to hear about what we think about Star Wars, God, we could talk about Star Wars for hours. Really going in depth into Dragon Age.
When Superman and Batman happens, expect me to dump a whole lot of information about the Dark Knight, because that's my favorite superhero, and he's got a movie coming out. Which always makes me happy.
Yeah, but timeliness is part of the issue here, and there's not a lot going on right now, It's kind of that between games period.
Springtime. Summer blockbusters haven't hit yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the winter stuff's over, so it's just sort of a palate cleanser before we move into the next thing. And so that gives us some time to relax and basically I figured this would probably end up with us just sharing stories about characters we played in role-playing games and that sort of thing. With that in mind, pose you a question. Who do you think's the most interesting character you've played? Not necessarily the coolest, just the one who had the most interesting arc in a role-playing game.
In a pen and paper role-playing game.
We'll go with pen and paper, sure.
Okay. Because in a video game, role-playing game, most interesting character I've played, Commander Shepard, hands down.
Oh, yeah, Commander Shepard that's just unfair. Commander Shepard has 3 games of ridiculous character development and just this might of voice acting behind them.
Yeah. And I played Fem Shep, so...
It's even better voice acting. Look, I played Male Shepard. Well, that's because I picked Male Shepard at the start, and then I had all 3 games to play through. Fem Shep's voice acting is better.
What was it when we first started playing Mass Effect? I looked at you and I was like, and you picked this guy? And you were like, yeah. And I'm like, but you've got Bastila Shan sitting right here. And you went with, who even is Mark Meer?
And full respect to Mark Meer, he has obtained my respect since then.
Oh yeah, definitely. The guy's way more versatile than his Shepard voice lets on.
But, actually, this is part of characters. I think that Male Shepard makes a much better Paragon, because Mark Meer's Shepard voice lends itself to that sort of very proud, chest out, paladin behavior.
Yeah,
he's a good
he's
cop.
good cop.
He cannot pull off renegade lines. He's not the loose cannon who doesn't play by the rules. He files his paperwork on time, and he reports to his direct superior officer. He's Captain America. He's a good guy. That Shepard voice, it just doesn't have the right timbre for a bad guy. Whereas female Shepard, I've seen him play Fem Shep. He did a couple runs, once as a Paragon, once as a Renegade. Her Paragon reads are not very good.
She still kind of reads like a heel.
Yeah, she kind of reads like she's just sort of surly about it. She's doing the right and just thing, but she's all mad that she has to.
Well, and there's just so much passion in the performance. I think even the neutral line. I was listening to a side by side of both the lines being read the other day when I was looking into some voice actor stuff, and the way Male Shepard's line is delivered, it's very matter of fact. I don't want to say flat because there's inflection there, but it's very matter of fact.
It's military. This is the information. Here's how it happens.
Whereas the female line is, there's so much passion there. I mean, it's the same neutral ass line, and she's just like, we're gonna do this, and this is what's gonna happen, and
which lends itself much better to the very willful renegade option.
Yeah, I've always said I like Fem Shep as a renegade because she is Nick Fury with boobs, and I don't mean Samuel L. Jackson. All kinds of props to the current Marvel Universe Nick Fury.
He's really cool.
I mean, Howling Commandos Nick Fury. I mean...
the guy who punches sharks.
Yeah.
The guy who rides into a building standing on a motorcycle firing 2 Uzis. That Nick Fury.
But yes, back to your original question, which I think is a great way to really dive into this concept. The most interesting arc I've had in a character... That is a good question. I've had a couple of really strong ones. There was Dwight, my cryokinetic detective. He was pretty good, but I don't think he's the most interesting. He started out as a good guy. He kind of followed through as a good guy, had a fall from grace. Picked himself back up to break even, basically, and then disappeared off the face of the earth. Then there was the guy I got going on right now, Maul, my orc barbarian. He's got an interesting story arc. He's got an interesting character arc, but it's not resolved yet. Really, it's very simple.
Yeah, it's very simple. Maul, I'm the DM of that campaign. He accidentally an entire Conan the Barbarian, and not the movie Conan, the guy from the original novels.
I've never read the novels,
and he accidentally an entire Conan the Barbarian. It is gloriously hilarious to watch, because up until very recently, I could almost point to actual Conan books, which I read a lot of, where each decision that he made throughout the campaign, and my campaigns are in no way based on, the Samaria mythos, anything like that, but I could point to decisions that Conan made which were eerily similar, and it was entirely accidental. I love actually being the end of that campaign to watch that happen.
You know, there was a character who really didn't get to reach fruition that I thought was going to be really good, which slightly brings up another topic. That was Icarus, my Zabrak Jedi.
Icarus is really cool.
He was the son of a previous character I played, who was basically Zabrak Brock Samson.
Yeah, exactly.
We had this whole party of Jedi, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I had been DMing campaign, Boy took over. His character became sort of an NPC. And
the pilot of the ship.
Yeah, and I was like, well, we still need a pilot, and, you know, we need somebody who owns a ship more so. What if I did this? And we came up with Zoot Alor. And I put on my best Patrick Warburton voice and blew shit up. The Jedis would be over there like sawing through droids and stormtroopers and what have you, and I was like solid snaking into armored personnel carrier and crashing it into another armored personnel carrier while screaming, "Let's do this!" But he didn't have an arc. His arc was linear and went upward from kind of a badass to complete ultimate badass. But we decided in the post game that he had a kid, and the game we had that followed that
set an appropriate amount of time later.
He was I really wanted to, you know, it's pretty tropey, but he was going to be that character that flirts with the dark side. You know, not to be a badass, but to really wrench the agony of it. Because it's so easy and the power is so good. A Boromir kind of character who wants to use this malfeasance to do good things and thinks he can when he can't.
Because unfortunately the malfeasance is sentient and doesn't like you very much.
And we never really got to take that very far. He got kicked out of the Jedi Order. Politely, because he did, you know, save a lot, but he crashed a spaceship into a planet.
Yeah.
A Star Destroyer.
Into a planet.
And,
that ended poorly for the planet.
But it ended better than, you know, it was the needs of the few versus the needs of the many.
And the Jedi don't really into that sort of thing.
No, they don't.
They're the needs of the no genocide pulse.
And that's where we left off. You know, he was kind of like, look, okay, I'm not a Jedi anymore. That doesn't mean I can't be your partner. I'm still part of the, what do they call the New Alliance or something like that?
The New Republic, I think I ended up calling it.
You know, we were still going to go on missions, but one thing led to another, and that game never got completed. I wanted so desperately for him to, you know, fall hard, to just be pulled in by the dark side and have that resurgence, that self-sacrificing moment. And the rest of the party totally saw what I was doing and made it very clear that they were not going to fucking let me. Like, they saw this story coming a mile away and they're like, you're not doing that, Fred. But I really wanted to see that play out, but it just never did. I thought that was a pretty good character arc. But, no, that's a tough question. I'm really not sure who I've played that's had that much growth. I guess maybe Dwight is probably the strongest one, and that's weird to say because he wasn't too dynamic.
He wasn't dynamic, but he was a protagonist.
Sure, I agree with that.
That's actually, I keep wanting to bridge this into a generalized role-playing conversation because it keeps coming up, but that's a big central tenet of how I DM. I want my characters, who I am DMing for, they're the protagonists. They are the heroes of the story. Because no one wants to play Robin. Unless Batman is also one of the players. No one wants to be Robin to the GMPC's Batman.
Yeah.
So I try and enable players whenever possible to be the protagonist, to be the driving force behind the story. So that's actually one of the reasons I really like Dwight as a character, because he and the character Brandy was playing, Tasha, he were the protagonists, and they very much shaped the story, and I actually really liked that story. And I didn't have a whole lot to do with it, to be honest. That's
Well, I mean, and it took such a toll on me, too. And I think that's really that, more than anything actually that happened in the game, was what caused Dwight to have his fall from grace, was the toll it took on me to play that character. Because, I mean, the guy was basically Sherlock Holmes, and I don't mean that as in I was playing a Sherlock Holmes XP. I mean I was playing a Fox Mulder XP without the aliens, and he was as good as Sherlock Holmes.
And he's not tooting his own horn here. I would put mysteries in front of them, and like crime scene mystery, all the clues are there. He would look at the thing. Eric would make one roll to get a piece of information that he couldn't tell at a glance, and then Eric would look at me and tell me what happened.
Like Monk.
And the character just followed from that. He became this ridiculously talented detective. Go figure, the guy who writes mystery stories for a living is better at figuring out mysteries than I am at making them.
Well, and honestly, I mean, that was fun. It was fun in the same way that, you and Brandy have fun when you're rolling 20s all the time.
Brandon and I roll really, really high.
It's fun to be powerful in a game. It's why I like Maul in a visceral sense. I don't always roll the best, but when I roll okay, given the way Maul's character is set up, I can wreck shop.
He's right, I've seen him do it.
But the reason I like Dwight is the small stuff. Every NPC you would float our way, I would do my best to either help, redeem, or at least get the justice they deserve.
Yeah, that's actually hilarious. I honestly don't know if any of the people I used to roleplay with would remember him, but in any campaign that I've ever that I had ever run up until a certain point, there were these two reoccurring NPCs. They were always hobos or vagrants or people who live out in the woods, based on essentially a story that I'd heard a long time ago. It doesn't really bear going into, but everyone else I'd ever played with, was like, oh, funny hobos. They make jokes. One of them's wacky. Cool. All right, that's entertaining. Moving on to the mission. Dwight stopped, got the hobo who wasn't insane a job, got the hobo who was insane mental help, and when he did fall off the map, he gave them his business, his detectiving business. It was ridiculous. I actually haven't used the NPCs since. Because it just...
You haven't, have you?
No, they're done. Somebody took them in. They're done now.
It was fun. I mean, it was really fun. I'm a little bit that kind of guy, but I don't have the means. I can't help everybody, so I don't think about it, and I don't try to. But Dwight really is that guy. Dwight's the guy who would give up his own food, his own, anytime we got paid for a mission, I would always find a way to funnel all of that money into somebody the fuck else. Just because Dwight didn't need it and other people did. Whether it was as simple as, paying a guy back for a cup of coffee he bought me, or, using the money to renovate a halfway house for ex-cons who are on the, path to being functional members of society again. That's what Dwight used his money for. And sometimes I wonder, because the only role-playing stories I have are from my friends or from the internet. And you get a lot of people who say that they're playing paladins, but they never really do any good deeds.
They fight the monsters.
Yeah, they fight the monsters. It's about the righteous vanquishing, and yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with playing a paladin like that. But I wonder how many of them do the little things, and those little things really enrich a character. For a while there, I fell into this pattern where our role-playing became ROLL playing. You just throw dice around and kill the monster. Who gives a shit? Whatever. Give me the loot. Cool, I got loot. Cool, I leveled up. Now I have a power with which I can kill the monster. Instead of getting deep into my character, and we had a fella who joined one of our games briefly, but he asked me what kind of, I was DMing the game, he asked me what kind of food there was available in the shops, and I hadn't even thought about a character buying their own individual, just for me snacks. I mean, this guy, I think he was looking for some sort of elvish brandy. Not my wife, the alcohol. And, yeah, I mean, I was so flabbergasted, and at the same time, there was like this rush of memory of, oh my god, I remember when my characters did this. My first big role-playing character, I'd had a couple before them, my first big one was an elvish rogue named Aerophoth Legerduster. I have tried to make him happen in various forms of media several times, but it never really pans out. But...
he's fetch. It's just
yeah,
not gonna happen.
He is fetch. It's not going to happen. He had a frying pan that sometimes he used as a weapon when he needed to, but he carried it around so he could cook on the road. He had little bits of character. We went across the country so he could get some cigarettes because the DM was notoriously anti-tobacco. So we had to go across the country for him to get some cigarettes. But those little character bits, I hadn't been doing them for years. And honestly, I haven't looked back since. I mean, until my my orc Maul got rich, he had exactly 1/4 of a cigar, which he would chew on constantly, and only light when he really needed it. And that was like his little character bit for a while. You knew that shit was getting serious when Maul actually lit the cigar. Or you knew that he was stressed when he actually lit the cigar. Eventually we made enough money that I dropped it because why wouldn't this guy keep himself in cigars? But,
because I am not notoriously anti-tobacco.
those little things, they go such a long way. We've made so many interesting stories, either as DMs or as players, about the little things.
Yeah, the last D&D 3.5 campaign that I ever played in, I played characters, a story arc you might remember from a little earlier. They were entirely unrelated. They happened unrelatedly, but I played a character who started off as he was a wizard. He was a shyster. He would sell people fake magic items that he swore he enchanted, and he would do this or that, and he would scam people out of money or out of time, and when the hammer came down, he would just leave. He was a wizard. He would skip town. So he was just this awful, irredeemable person. Entirely because he was one non-standard race, and he was violently addicted to this herb that's not really super addictive to anyone else. So he could buy it. It just wasn't. But it was addictive to him. So he was a drug addict.
Yeah, I consider it like, this was my Final Fantasy IX campaign. He was basically playing Zidane.
I didn't know that at the time, as I've never played Final Fantasy IX.
And he was basically hyper-addicted to pot. I mean, like a heroin addict is addicted to heroin, to pot.
Because it worked differently on my other race's physiology. So... it was, and through the story, through associating with the character Brandy was playing at the time, who was this really right and just person, and associating with all these heroic people who he fell in with, sort of on accident, to be honest. And because of the way the Final Fantasy IX story goes, as I'm given to understand, he became this upright guy, and it was all because it was through those little things. It would be little things like where he's got some free time in town, so he tries to go, cheat at cards to get some money for more red flowers, what the pot, XP was called.
Which actually in, 3rd edition D&D, if you roll poorly, that shit is crazy.
Yeah.
But if you roll decently, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's minor. But he would, go try and cheat at cards, but he'd be pulled away and have to go, help save a train, or help do this, or help do that. And it slowly just started becoming apparent to him that this kingdom and stuff he was trying to save would not be serviced by him then, raking the coffers empty and teleporting off with all of their monies.
Well, and I think a lot of it was that people actually formed friendships with him. You know, not so much Brandy's character or the prince, quote-unquote prince. He was the son of a Yakuza boss. But Puck was really the driving force. They formed such a strong friendship.
And Puck was a really good guy. So he was this, generally pretty amoral dude who has this really nice, good guy Greg style friend who's always nice and helps people. And
for those in the know, this was a combination of Puck from Final Fantasy IX and Freya from Final Fantasy IX.
And helps people and actually helped him when it seemed like he was down on his luck. He was actually trying to get money out of the guy, but he helped and he seemed very genuine about it. And that friendship, along with with the situation, he was just sort of made this guy into, it changed his alignment. And that's not something I tend to do lightly in D&D. He went from true neutral, bordering on neutral evil, to just, neutral good or chaotic good, one of the two.
Would you say that's probably your most interesting character arc?
In terms of D&D, I mean, you've seen a lot of the D&D I've played who had character arcs. Before it was much more the other kind of role-playing.
I think your current character is probably going to end up being maybe not as strong, but pretty interesting. I mean...
yeah, but he's just starting. That was
much session. Like Mole, it's not quite over yet.
But you've seen all the characters I've played with character arcs. Can you think of someone who was even half as interesting?
I'm really not sure.
I mean, Jim maybe, but he was.
He just. That was a campaign that my wife ran in a short amount of time, and I mean a campaign in a short amount of time. We were addicted to it.
It was maybe a month. The whole thing lasted a month. We played 12, 13 hours a day. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, we were so into that game. I was playing, for anybody who's actually read my Colt Regan books, this is where John and Jim come from Fortunate Son.
Yeah, he played John, I played Jim, and yes, Jim is that much of an a-hole all the time.
If you're not familiar with the Colt Regan books, might I remind everyone that there's a nice little ad right below this video. It links directly to where the books can be purchased. $10 a pop, plus shipping, of course. And you, too, can read some incredible stories about supernatural social issues and mysteries and demons and stuff.
Let me ask you a question, Eric. Do you know the definition of shameless plug?
I do. That would imply I have shame.
Fair enough.
Jim did have really, really strong character arc, but it happened like that. And it was really dirt simple. He became the lie, and he loved the lie.
So he just stuck with it.
And this was a con artist kind of character. Reminded me a lot of Edward from the Anita Blake series.
Yeah, very similar guys, actually. I hadn't really gotten too into the series at that point, I don't think. The timeline's a little skewed on me there, but they were similar guys. He was, a very cold sniper character. He didn't get into personal interaction at all. Brandy's campaign, as it is wont to do, put him in a situation where he had to personally interact and be a much more friendly guy.
Yeah, you were pretending to be a deacon at a local church.
Yeah, so he had to be very upright and very out with the community and try to do good works to keep his cover up. And he eventually just sort of fell in love with who he was, and he felt much better being this person than the person he had been. And he fell in love with this girl who he had basically just been, keeping by as a, on and off again girlfriend to help his cover. And it made him a better person. As I'm saying this, I get the sense that I'm putting across that I like redemptive story arcs.
and it sounds like, from what I keep saying, that I like Falls from Grace, especially if I were to frame what Maul is currently in the middle of it really sounds like a fall from grace, even though it isn't.
No.
He never really started in grace. This game of Brandy's, by the way, so cool. We did it about 5 years ago, 6?
Something like that.
Yeah, 6 years ago sounds about right. Maybe even coming up on 7. And when I watched it later, when it aired, it really reminded me of the season of Dexter with, who am I thinking of? John Lithgow. It was about this priest who was a necromancer, who was trying to take over whatever. But he was, like, legitimately trying to take over whatever. What else would he take over? I don't remember what he was actually trying to do. But he was legitimately, like, a good guy. He believed in the Bible. He was, but he had this little sliver of madness, and every time John Lithgow's character, would be doing the helping hands, building houses for the poor, and, just being this honest, good, wonderful man, and then it flips and he's Two-Face and he's this murderer and he's, it just reminded me of this campaign so much, and I thought it was so funny that we had done such a similar thing years prior. And you were basically playing Dexter.
I was playing a cold, emotionless guy who had to get in good with this guy to take him out.
Yeah. And
I never made that connection.
Well, I don't think you saw all that season.
No, I didn't see that season of Dexter. Y'all watched it without me, and I'm too lazy to watch stuff by myself.
Your work schedule.
I sit on the internet, so.
But if you out there, Ultimo Dragon, have never seen that season of Dexter,
from what I understand, it's the best one of the
Yeah, definitely, hands down. I've always been kind of iffy on that show. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's awful. Most of the time, I just don't give a shit. But that season was really good, start to finish. You need some context before you begin it. But you can figure it out. I mean, it really works, and the whole thing was really superb.
One, to sort of clear the air a little bit, and two, because I feel like I should give a counter example. Another character I had who had a really, really interesting story arc was Miles.
Miles, yeah.
Miles started off as a good guy. He was a cop, an ex-cop. He was a private investigator. And he was undead. It's a Cold Regan series. It keeps sounding like we're plugging the thing. It's just the setting we play role-playing.
Yeah, it's really all we play. Even when we play fantasy games, we use a bastardized version of Cold Regan.
Yeah, so...
Train has something to say. Indeed. Everything is good for Train.
There we go. So, I'm just going to talk over it.
Yeah,
it's got to be super quiet to these people. Or this person, viewer, Ultimo Dragon.
You keep preying on his multiple personality disorder, and I think that's rude.
I want Ultimo Dragon to be all that he can be.
He has the decency to listen to our show, and you're poking fun at the fact that he believes he is also a lawyer in Florida with a family.
That's deep. That's a good reference. Miles, he was a private investigator, and he, over the course of a long campaign, and this one was a year or more, spread out over different sessions.
Yeah, we really worked that one.
He just lost it. He just slowly lost all traces of the good guy, the genuinely good guy he started out as. He became more ruthless, and he became more and more willing to do bad things for what he saw as the greater good, and what he saw as the greater good kept being less and less of actually the greater good. He just slowly went from an actual good person to a Knight Templar, to an extremist. And that is actually probably one of the more interesting character arcs I've had, because I think that was one of the only characters I've ever had to retire, because he got too evil for the campaign.
Yeah. I mean, it probably didn't help that he kept bouncing around partners, because I couldn't find a character concept that worked. I started out playing a transvestite vampire.
Hey, I liked it. I like Istanbul.
Yeah, I did too. But, there was so much time passed between sessions that I think he changed accents like 4 times.
Yeah, he did.
And he just wasn't we're playtesting the system. Otherwise, I'd be plugging for you to buy that too.
It was up for sale for a while, but there was stuff that we had to go back and fix. A new version will be up for sale eventually.
Eventually. Mostly what we're waiting on now is art and me to get off my ass and format some shit. But, I digress. I had to get rid of that character because the vampire wasn't really working at the time, and he wasn't good for what we needed. Then there was someone else who came in temporarily that just did not work. And then there was Cade.
Cade was great. Cade was a
character built to be bro.
Yeah, he was bro. He was super bro.
They had a lot of good adventures together. I had fun with Miles and Cade.
I think Cade increased Miles' length before he had to be retired by a good 6 sessions.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But funny story as well. We're watching the season finale of Criminal Minds. It's a 2-parter. This is fairly recent, so I'll go ahead and throw up a spoiler alert. Both of those episodes are about bad cops. The unit is dealing with bad cops. Like belligerent, stupid,
mean, unhelpful.
And you haven't seen those episodes, and you're just talking about Brandy's campaigns, which is what Brandy said when she saw the episode. She was like, is this one of my games? What's wrong with these cops?
This is since we're private investigators, and we're up on the up and up with the law, but we're very much like shadow organization, private investigators, because of the people we were working for in that campaign, the campaign where I was playing Miles and he was playing Cade, and it's just, the cops didn't trust us, and for some reason, Brandy really likes putting really obstinate, really unfriendly, unhelpful, almost obstruction of justice-y cops everywhere.
Well, the thing is, we keep going in her games to small towns.
Small insular, culty
rural towns. Where, you'll find a lot in real life where the cops resent outside authority. I mean, it's pretty tropey in late 80s action movies.
Yeah, where we were basically the equivalent of the feds.
Federal marshals. So the cop sees them show up and go, "You city slickers ain't got no business around here. This is our territory and we got it taken care of."
He's almost quoting word for word, by the way.
They were the most unhelpful bastards. And the funny thing was, more often than not, they weren't crooked cops.
No, they were just unhelpful pricks.
Just stubborn and again reminding me of Anita Blake. Anytime she had to leave town to do anything, she would run into cops who were like, nope, 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 nope. But, I think I'm going to have to settle on Dwight as my, most interesting character. Which I think is a shame, because I really don't feel like his arc, his growth was that interesting. He did a lot of interesting things. I had a lot of fun with him. I don't think he's my most fun character. But I've played a lot of really shallow characters as my player character. Because I tend to fall into a support role, and I think that's kind of why I don't have those big dynamic things. I was playing a sort of amalgam of the real-world Gilgamesh and the Gilgamesh from the Final Fantasy series in a post-apocalyptic campaign. Long story. The dude had, 0 character growth.
Yeah,
he's the same guy in the end as he was in the beginning.
That's just true. I was the DM for that. He didn't change at all.
It wasn't a bad thing, but
to be fair, he was a couple thousand years old at that point.
Well, yeah, why would you change at that point? But gosh, what other characters
fit the story better anyway? You were. This is it. No. We will come back to this because I'm proud of that campaign. But it is too late in the podcast to start that story.
Sorry. But, the characters I've played. You've seen them. I tend to play support roles that don't take front and center stage. Which is weird, because I'm me, You can't walk 5 feet without seeing something I've plastered my name all over. Copyright Sportco Studios 2014. But I tend to, when I roleplay, I'll play characters who don't change much, who are the Xander and the Willow of the situation.
Just sort of stand back, help the protagonist, snark.
I mean,
which, to be fair, that's pretty much who I played for a long time. At the very least until I met you, and then a little ways after, I played wizards, who would basically just stand back, help the party, and snark at stuff.
Well, even Dull, he didn't really change much.
No, yeah. He didn't.
He got stronger emotionally, but he didn't. Dull was Sabin, for lack of time.
Because again, in one of the many Final Fantasy experiments he did, actually the first big campaign I ever played with him, he was doing Final Fantasy VI, and I played a monk. I hadn't been told it was Final Fantasy VI. I just happened to play Sabin.
Oh yeah, I didn't tell him it was Final Fantasy IX when they picked the characters they picked either. To be fair, Brandy's character really wasn't, her character from Final Fantasy VI wasn't really in Final Fantasy VI. I gave her a lot of the roles of Terra, but
yeah, no, I just happened to accidentally a whole Sabin.
Yeah, he was like, I'm gonna play a monk. I'd be like, fucking sweet, that makes my life easier. And then in Final Fantasy IX, Brandy ended up playing Garnet, Dagger, if you prefer out there in Viewerland. Very different Garnet, because she was a monk, and she wanted revenge, and...
It was a different campaign. It was, from what I understand, the plot of Final Fantasy IX doesn't involve revenge against a Yakuza boss who killed your parents.
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just, even the characters I have that have the potential to become really deep and complicated, the biggest lament I continue to have. It used to be Sidney Fallon. Sidney Fallon was hail fellow well met. Like, the party literally met him when he offered to buy them drinks. And he had this big gregarious voice. He would always be like, hello everyone! Yes, drinks all around! Glad to meet you! Thank you! He wore plate armor. He was a cleric of some awful deity. Anytime the party went to sleep, he would sneak off, wait for travelers to come by, slaughter them, bathe in their blood, put his armor back on, and come back to camp like nothing happened. Any other time, he was happy and, just as a ruse. But that character would never have grown. That was the character. It was one note. He might have grown to like the party more, but he was never going to be anything other than what he started as. He was my biggest lament that I've never gotten to finish. I think we played a session with Sydney, and I think he was one of my best character concepts. Until Yeezy the Hut.
Yes, you heard him right. Yeezy the Hut.
Yeezy the Hut was, we used 4th edition D&D as a basis for...
a Star Wars campaign.
Right.
By the way, that works amazingly well. Pretty much all the psionic classes are Jedi. Just bought and paid for. It's hilarious.
And he was a warlord. I used some of the errata books to fluff it up for him to be a ranged fighter more than a melee fighter. But he usually didn't do anything. He would sit there on his datapad on Space Twitter, and he wore like a big fluffy fur coat. He drove a ship that was like his magic pimp bus. And he was scum! Absolute scum! And he wore slotted shades. And because of the way the Warlord works, you don't so much do damage as that character, but you give other people the opportunity to take extra turns. Or you heal them, but not by holy magic. You heal them with, like, good vibes. You heal them with encouraging words. So here Yeezy would stand back and pat people on the shoulders and be like, you got this, man. Go to it. While poking around on his datapad and just ignoring the fight as a whole. Which was fun in and of itself. But the character had so much room for growth because he was scum. The campaign we were playing, there was a big ancient evil artifact. that he slithered off to steal?
This campaign's been long dead enough that I'm fine spoiling it for Eric, who was one of the players. The thing they were stealing was one of the maps to the Starforge.
You know, I think you actually told me about that before, yeah. He didn't know what it was, but he just saw a big triangle thing that was in a room that was locked. That looks expensive, that looks useful, I could probably fence it for a lot of money. And he was going to betray the whole party to do it. And there's so much opportunity to grow there.
Yeah, and grow into a corpse with lightsaber burns.
No, to grow into it, because Jedi wouldn't do that. They'd want to reprimand him and you know, reform him. And I would have let them. I mean, it would have been a fight. But I would have had that character grow until he was going, you guys can do this! We've got this! And he wasn't just ignoring the fight for his data pad. But we played like one session because two of the people we were with were kind of assholes. And we didn't want to play with them anymore.
So we didn't.
It's a character concept.
Oh, you know what? That's actually, we're running a little long here, but I don't care because that is I like that topic. My biggest regret for a character who did not get the justice they so righteously deserve.
I'm going to go ahead and apologize. We're going to close on this story, I think, but I will begin by apologizing formally in front of Ultimo Dragon before you even get started. Now go ahead and tell them what I did to you.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about.
I'm talking about the liar, you know that.
Yes!
Yeah, alright. I don't know what he thinks he did to me. Alright, I was playing this character. We got like one session, maybe two.
It was a long session.
I utterly power gamed to get his stats where they were. He was the best at lying that you can be within the system we were playing. And I was playing him as an unrepentant Nick Cage and Matchstick Men con artist. And I was having the most fun ever. And it wasn't like I was doing bad. I didn't do anything bad to the party. I didn't do anything bad to the people we were working for. I would go into Men's Warehouse and scam them out of a bunch of expensive suits. I would scam people at the pharmacy counter out of meds that I needed. I would scam people into clubs. I would convince people to tell me stuff by pretending to be a cop.
Or an old high school friend.
Or an old high school friend that they'd forgotten. I straight up pulled a Phil Connors, we sat behind each other in Mrs. Walsh's English class style move. And I think that character had amazing room for growth. Because aside from the fact that he was, one, incredibly good at saying things that weren't true, he was, two, otherwise basically an okay guy who just wanted his. So if he could get a couple friends, it would have been very easy to turn him into a much nicer guy. And I feel like that character did not get the justice he so richly deserved because that would have been a fun character to play.
I keep looking forward to another multi-person campaign because the reason that we abandoned that campaign and that he didn't get to finish that character or even really grow that character at all is because we run a lot of campaigns with 3 people, 1 DM and 2 players. If you can't trust the other guy on your team, whether in character or out of character, the game's not going to work. It's why I haven't tried to run Yeezy since. We've made at least 3 new characters since then. I've not tried to make Yeezy once. Because I understand he can only function in a large party where you have room for a guy you can't trust. But we are well over time. I do want to thank you for sticking with us for so long. And yeah, I think that's all we have to say for now. So we'll catch you next time on the Two Nerds Podcast.
Until we get back, always try to remember, everything is better when nerds talk about it.
Fuck it, let's go!